Welcome to the module on the aorist participle and on the adjectival translation. We'll be covering chapters 28 and 29 in your Mounts textbook. The chart before you is the forms for the first aorist active participle. Remember that the participles are non-indicative moods. And what is true of the participle will be true of the other non-indicative moods, that there is no augment being used for any of the tense forms for non-indicative moods. The augment is only used for indicative moods. So all the way up until chapter 25 in your textbook on mounts, the grammar uses the augment where the tense required it. But for the first aorist active participle, since it's a non-indicative mood and time is not built into the grammar or the form of the verb, there is no augment being used because the augment is a past time grammatical form. So the aorist active participle does not have time built into its form. Instead, it emphasizes kind of action, which is undefined. And let's kind of go over the forms for the first aorist. So there's no augment. And then you use the first aorist stem is always the verbal root, but because we're using luo as our paradigmatic verb, the verbal root and the lexical stem happen to be the same, so that's lu. So we have no augment, and then you have lu, and then you have the sa tense formative that tells you it's aorist. Then you have the tense formative that tells you that it's a participle. So you have the new tau, and for the feminine forms, you're going to have another form of sa. So there's a variation. And then you're also going to have the 3-1-3 noun endings. So for the masculine forms, remember that the 3-1-3 endings or the third declension endings for the masculine form is sigma, os, e, alpha, s, own, si or sin, and os. So this is the masculine case endings. So to form the first aorist active participle for the masculine case, we have a nominative singular masculine case. You take there's no augment. You take the verbal root lu. You add the sa tense formative. You have the participle tense formative, the new tau, and then you're supposed to add a sigma, and remember the nominative singular forms are always the irregular ones. But what happens when you add the sigma to the new tau tense formative is that these drop out, and the final form looks like this: lusas, and that's the form that's slightly unexpected for the nominative singular masculine form. But for the genitive, we'll be able to see the stem for the rest of the paradigm. So there's no augment. You take the verbal root lu, you add the sa tense formative, the new tau, and since the genitive is singular, you add os. And so lusantos is where we see the stem that we'll be using for the rest of the paragraph, this lusant. So the dative is lusanti. The accusative singular is lusanta. The nominative plural is lusantes. The genitive plural is lusantone. The dative plural is lusant, and we add si or sin. This sigma causes the nu and tau to drop, and the final form will be lusasi or sin. And then the accusative is plural, is lusantas. So let's say these forms. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Lusas, lusantas, lusanti, lusanta, lusantes, lusantone, lusasin, lusantas. And let's go over now to the neuter forms. They also use the third declension endings, but for the neuter forms, the endings are nothing, os, e, nothing, a as an alpha, own, si or sin, alpha. And so when we add lusant, here's our stem, lusant, and we add nothing to it, the tau drops, and so the final form for the nominative singular neuter is lusan. And then for the genitive singular neuter form, you have no augment, the verbal root, the sa transformative, the new tau participle, and then you add os for the genitive, so lusantas. The dative is lusanti. The accusative form is the same as the nominative. It's lusan. The plural is lu san ta. There we have the alpha. Then it's lu san tone for the genitive plural. Lu sa si or sin for the dative plural, and lu san ta for the accusative plural. So let's say these forms. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Lusan, lusantas, lusanti, lusan, lusanta, lusantone, lusasin, lusanta. What about the feminine forms? The feminine forms use a different tense formative. Instead of the new tau, uses the sa, and it uses the first declension ending. So remember the first declension endings for the feminine form. It will be, we're going to use pasa as our example for the feminine endings. You take the verbal root lu without the augment. Then you have the sa transformative, and then the next sa is actually doesn't tell you that it's aorist, but tells you that's a participle. So it's lu sa sa. And then the genitive form is lu sa ses. So you have alpha here and then ace, and because the stem ends with that sigma letter, you're expecting it to look like pasa or like the noun doxa. You're going to see the vowel switch. So it's lusasa for the nominative singular, lusases for the genitive singular, lusase iota subscript for the dative singular, lusasan for the accusative singular, lusasai for the nominative plural, lusason for the genitive plural, lusasais for the dative plural, and lusasas for the accusative plural. Lastly, if you look at the column where there says translation, I gave two translations. One is the adverbial translation, where the conjunction after is being used with the aorist participle form, and the other one is an adjectival or a substantive translation, where you're translating the participle as if it is a noun. Now, if the participle stands by itself and it's not attached to anything, probably it's best to try to translate it this way, because then you get the case endings translated. So the one who loosed, of the one who loosed, to the one who loosed, the one who loosed. This translation, when you only have the participle by itself and not attached to anything, allows you to show the nominative, the genitive, the dativeness of the form, so that you can translate that using the prepositions. But most of the time, the participle will be used in the sentence, and it's likely that the adverbial translation is used. So that's why it's listed first. So when you actually see the participle used in translation, you'll probably translate it as after, and the time that you'll translate the participle is what we call antecedent time. And we'll go over that in a bit. Right now, we just want to go over the form. So I just wanted to explain a little bit of the translation column, that you have two. One is an adverbial translation, one is adjectival, and we'll go over how to translate in more detail after we go over the forms.